Is the Bank of International Settlements any closer in issuing XRP as a tier 1 asset for the banking system? Jake Claver jumps in here, as well as I have a ton of research around this topic so you can really understand what's happening here. By the time you finish this video, you should have a good grasp about where we are heading with XRP and if it will get that tier 1 asset designation. Let's just jump right in.
We got Chris. He says, once fully adopted, is there a situation where politics can get involved and reverse all of XRP's momentum after price appreciation? Depends on, it's a good question. And it depends on who is the authority that implements it. I can tell you who I think is going to be the authority that implements it. And it is non-jurisdictional. It only takes one announcement from the BIS that this is their preferred third-party vendor or a tier 1 asset. Done. They make the decisions for all of the banks globally. And if they decide this is the one, and it's not Solana, and it's not Bitcoin, and it's not whatever else, and they say XRP is it, it's done. There's no politicking. There's no flopping it around, changing things. The IMF, the BIS, the UN, all of them will pile in on XRP. And every government will then pile in on XRP on top of that for their reserves. And now you're talking about like crazy demand. Been trying to tell you guys.
All right. Would it be higher than 50 or 100,000 per XRP? Man. All right. So let's understand what is currently a tier 1 asset so you can like get where we're going here. So what examples of tier 1 assets right now are cash reserves, money held by banks for liquidity, central bank deposits, funds held by a central bank or the central bank, high quality government bonds, sovereign debt, U.S. treasuries, physical gold, if allocated and directly held by the bank, and core equity, which is common stock, retained earnings, or certain non-cumulative preferred shares. Now, XRP is currently not recognized as a tier 1 asset by the Bank of International Settlements, or current banking regulations make this designation unlikely in the near future. For XRP to be classified as a tier 1 asset, it would require a significant changes to the BIS rules, as well as broad regulatory consensus, neither on which appears evident at this time. BIS criteria for tier 1 assets. Tier 1 assets under Basel III and BIS definitions are highest quality capital for banks such as cash, central bank reserves, secure government bonds, and common equity. These assets share attributes of high liquidity, low risk, and reliable loss absorbing capacity. Notably, physical gold was recently reclassified as a tier 1 asset based on its liquidity and universal settlement of trust. For XRP or any crypto asset to join this category, the BIS would need to revise its prudential standards and treat select digital assets on par with cash reserves, gold, and sovereign debt. Currently, BIS classifies unbacked cryptocurrencies, including XRP, Bitcoin, and Ethereum, as Group 2 assets due to their because volatility and the lack of it backing. Banks may only maintain exposure to these assets up to 1% of their tier 1 capital, a rule set to take effect globally in January of 2026, so right around the corner. Here's Jake also talking about this in 2024, late 2024.
Imagine what could happen if XRP gets a tier 1 asset designation from the Bank of International Settlements. A tier 1 asset designation means the highest level of trust and liquidity in global finance. This status would allow XRP to be held as a core reserve asset by central banks, similar to gold and U.S. treasuries. With the tier 1 backing, XRP would not just be another cryptocurrency, it'd be a critical piece of the global financial system. The result, increased adoption, greater liquidity, and potentially massive price appreciation. The Bank of International Settlements plays a central role in setting global financial standards. And if they were to elevate XRP to tier 1 status, it would signal trust, regulatory acceptance, and broader usage in cross-border settlements. The implications of this move would be huge, potentially cementing XRP's place as a core piece of infrastructure in banking globally.
All right. And then also just to give you some perspective here, the team at Ripple look at some of the institutions that they have worked with and worked for Some of this is the White House. I got a better list here because it's hard to know all of these little pictures, right? Like what are all of these things stand for? And so here is the complete list from Rosie Rios all the way down to Jess Chang. And here are the institutions that people at Ripple have worked for, Workle. And then here, of course, Ripple, U.S. Treasury Department, U.S. Federal Reserve, U.S. Department of Justice, State Department, Commerce, Federal Deposit Insurance, White House, U.S. President Seal, U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Interior, U.S. Department of Agriculture, SWIFT, International Monetary Fund, World Economic Forum, and the Bank of International Settlements. That was a juicy one. And there's a lot of people that believe XRP will be considered a tier 1 asset. Now, looking at what the BIS's plans are here, let me go ahead and play this for you, give you some additional information on what they're looking at.
With all that in mind, how do we deal with this issue of exchange rates and interoperability? How do we get these digital currencies to really just talk to each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think when we talk about interoperability, we can see it at least in 3 different levels. So the first level is how we manage domestic interoperability. So how we generate this digital currency solution and make this speak with the other things that are out there. In a little bit in the idea of generating a platform so that everyone can connect to that platform and take advantage of the huge network externalities that we can get out of there. The second level is how do we manage cross-border transactions, even within the same currency. And that presents a certain level of challenges there. But when we talk about cross-currency and cross-border, then we face a completely difficult and different environment. And we can see 3 dimensions here. One is the technical dimension, so how we manage to get a system that speaks in a certain cryptographic language to speak with another that speaks another slightly different language. So that is one level of complexity. We need to get the technologies to speak to each other. The messaging element is fundamental. The second dimension, which is much more complicated to solve, so that one, the first one was the easy one, okay? And there is a lot of money that is being put in terms of trying to solve these technical issues of interoperability. Now, the second one is more complicated. It has to do with liquidity. So imagine that you have a pair of currencies for which there is not a complementary demand. You need to go and search for a third-party currency in order to make this settlement actually happen. And this really complicates things. So we need to put pieces of technology that can make more efficiency this use of liquidity so that more transactions can be settled. The third dimension, which is even more difficult than the previous one, is how do we manage to get homogeneity in terms of the policy requirements on different countries. And this becomes even more complicated when we think about, for example, AML-CFT and principles-based policies, and when we think about risk-based policies. We can code things that are very clearly stated, but when we're talking about principles-based regulation, this thing becomes really complicated, especially in an environment, as Tom said, in which 110 nations might have 110 different ways of looking at this. So we need work in these 3 dimensions: technology, liquidity, and also, and more importantly, probably in the policy side of things. Think about AML-CFT, but also think about privacy. Different countries have very...
How do you connect all of these payment systems together, right? Wouldn't a bridge asset come into play here and help you do everything that you're trying to do? This is about the BIS. The reason the BIS has so much power, right? That is something that I wanted to show you here. This is a great video that really kind of gives you a behind the scenes look at what the BIS can actually do. And they don't report to any government or anybody. Listen.
If you look at the group of people who meet through the BIS,
what's that?
The BIS is the Bank of International Settlements, and it's the central bank of central banks.
Where is that located?
It's in Basel, Switzerland. It has 63 of the most powerful central banks as its members, and the New York Fed and the Fed are both shareholders. They became shareholders in 1994.
In one sentence, what's the purpose of the Bank of International Settlements?
Okay, so there are 2 things you need to know about the Bank of International Settlements.
I'm not sure my brain's big enough for this, but keep going.
It is. It has sovereign immunity.
What does that mean?
It's above the law.
It's its own country.
Right. It's its own country. It has its own police force. And essentially, other than one of its staff being in a car accident or, minor things, no one has the legal authority to move against it. Number 2, it can move money and hold it on its balance sheet and manage money secretly. If I want to steal $21 trillion from the U.S. government and park it on the balance sheet of the BIS, it can move it anywhere in the world and it can keep it on its balance sheet secretly.
First of all, where does its power? Like, who empowered it to have sovereign immunity and the right?
It was created after World War I, and it was created in theory to manage the reparations of the German government. But if you read the real history, it was because the Bank of England and the central bankers wanted an entity that had sovereign immunity.
There it is, guy. An entity with sovereign immunity. All right. And then we have seen a lot of mentions in BIS reports about XRP and XLM. This is just one example. And Verson from Black Swan Capitalist says the BIS just released a document detailing a private-public collaboration on a unified protocol that for cross-border payments within a two-tier monetary framework. The BIS has consistently spotlighted only XRP and XLM for this role in leveling the playing field. The project builds on a unified ledger concept proposed by the BIS. It will investigate how tokenized commercial bank deposits can seamlessly be integrated with tokenized wholesale central bank money on a public-private programmable core financial platform with the goal of enhancing the functioning of cross-border payments. The aim is to provide new solutions using smart contracts and the programmability while maintaining the two-tier structure of the monetary system. So they're talking here about Project Agora, the public-private collaboration, and we know how important this is because if it wasn't important, the BIS specifically wouldn't be testing these things, right? And here's something from Smoke, something very similar here, Unified Ledger. This is a totally, completely different document. Here is the interledger protocol as a layer, celibate layer of this stack here. And then here it says Unified Ledger sits at the heart of the Finternet. And it says Unified Ledger unifies all the blockchain networks using an interledger protocol, which will seamlessly interoperate between the different networks and allows the exchange of digital assets among them. Remember, Ripple was the people behind Interledger protocol. And just to look at some other connections here between the BIS, Ripple, and XRP, Ripple officially joined the BIS Committee on Payments and Market Infrastructure, the task force in 2023, participating alongside industry leaders like MasterCard, SWIFT, and central bank representatives. The BIS working group is also dedicated to exploring cross-border payments interoperability with Ripple's representative leading payment operations discussions. Ripple's inclusion signals institutional recognition and trust within the group seeking blockchain-based solutions for faster, transparent, and international settlements. Technology pilots and CBDC interoperability, the BIS Innovation Hub and Ripple have partnered to assess how diverse central bank digital currencies can interoperate with Ripple's technology. BIS projects such as Project Rosalind have evaluated Ripple's architecture for connecting multiple CBDCs, enabling instant cross-border settlement, leveraging RippleNet technology and ISO 20022 messaging, directly aligning with XRP's capabilities. Ripple's interledger protocol and on-demand liquidity solutions powered by XRP have also been referenced as foundational models for multiple CBDCs and digital assets. You have 130 countries working on central bank digital currency. One of the most tested technologies in the entire world for that is Ripple's technology. XRP regulatory compliance. XRP has received explicit recognition for meeting BIS global payment standards, particularly around messaging interoperability, unlimited liquidity provision, and regulatory compliance. It's an ISO 20022 compliance infrastructure, ensures seamless data communication between diverse banking networks. API is required for next generation cross-border payments. Remember, that's RippleNet. And then, of course, strategic positioning in global finance. Ripple does not position itself as a competitor to SWIFT, but as a complement to the accelerator of global payments, helping the BIS advance global standards in close collaboration with central banks. Institutions cite XRP as a showcase example of a neutral bridge asset for instant automated global settlements between CBDCs. Another thing too here, guys, if you don't tell somebody, right? Like if you are just getting started with a business and you're looking to go after the king or whoever is the top dog in that business, you often say here, we're not going to go compete, but we're going to help you do your job better, right? Because then you don't become an instant threat and they're not focused on you. But sooner or later, you're going to get big enough and they will start to see you for what you truly are. And Swift, starting to see that. And then, of course, all the money phases, world payment rail integration, CBDC and government adoption, tokenized of real world assets, liquidity hub adoption, regulatory green light, derivatives at world scale, escrow unlocked strategically, IMF, ESER, BIS, tier 1. And of course, we did see some new updates here from Crypto Erie. New BIS crypto requirements finalized begins January 1st. A bank's total exposure to all Group 2 assets must be under 1% of its Tier 1 capital. No single Group 2 crypto assets can make it above 5% in the total holdings. So there hasn't yet been anything done to make XRP a Tier 1 asset. The real question is, will something be done soon? And if so, when? All right, I hope you learned something about Tier 1 assets, the BIS, XRP, and Ripple. That was the goal here for this video, guys. If you did, you can like the video. You can leave a comment down below. You can do whatever you want. I appreciate you. Have a great weekend. I'm Crypto Sensei. Aloha.